All these movies I'm listing have psychologically screwed with me in some way. Dare I say I like these movies? I feel weird saying that. They're like nothing but sex and death. So it's kind of icky, but also intriguing. Today we're looking at 5 disturbing movies that shook me, and we're going to rank them in terms of least disturbing to most disturbing. If you're new here, I'm Micah. I'm a licensed therapist, and here we like to talk about horror. Starting with number 5 is Enter the Void. Well, and it's not even technically horror. Feels like horror to me. Every time I watch it, it disrupts me and sends me into kind of a weird existential crisis. Does anything even matter if we're just going to die anyway? So in this movie, we follow a man named Oscar, who is an American living in Japan. He also does and sells drugs. He actually dies in the very beginning of the movie. He was shot through the bathroom door of a bar by police. The police were there because he was set up by another friend. So the entire very long movie is centered around flashbacks of his life, but then also some current things happening. Kind of has a collage vibe like Gumo. Makes a little more sense though. So his sister, who's living with him in Japan, is most impacted by the loss. And we learn that they have a significant trauma history together. So this movie is actually very visually appealing. That's something that I really like about it. There's a lot of psychedelic colors and movement. It could give you a little motion sickness if you're prone to it. So the setting overall of the movie involves a lot of neon lights, and we are seeing everything as the movie watcher from the perspective of Oscar's spirit. The trauma history related to when he and his sister were children is very intense. The car accident is shown, filmed from the back seat perspective of the car, hitting another car head on. And the aftermath of the crash is also included in the movie, with 2 little kids in the back who just watched their parents die. This movie grabs you and holds on tight. So if you have the interest, the patience, and the emotional fortitude, go for it. There's intense depictions of grief and sexual situations. There's some weird incest vibes we won't talk about. There's a lot of drugs. There's an abortion. This whole movie's just a mess of life and death. And in conclusion, I don't recommend watching this before you go to work, especially if you work as a therapist. Number 4 is a Lars von Trier creation named Antichrist. So this movie just begins with the sex scene. They were unsimulated sex scenes, so like there's for real people having sex in this, and they're recording it very closely, which, you know, it's usually for a different kind of movie. It's not the actual actor and actress, is what I read, is there's body doubles that are doing the actual sex scene. But it looks like it's 2 main actors. It's very graphic, and it's a little uncomfortable if you weren't expecting it. So while this couple is having sex, their toddler son wakes up, starts wandering around. He pushes a chair up against a window and falls through the window, falling to his death. And this messed me up from the very beginning. My daughter was about the same age the first time I watched this movie. This one broke me. I was a mess because it's very dramatic death and you can see it kind of in slow motion. So the mom in this situation has some atypical grief response. She ends up being hospitalized in a psychiatric care facility. Dad is a therapist. He doesn't think that she's getting great treatment, decides he's going to treat her himself. That's a bad idea. That's always a bad idea. You should know better as a therapist. They go on a little trip to this cabin and this place that they call Eden, where they've spent time before as a family. There's a lot of creepy, unsettling scenes with different types of animals.
Chaos reigns.
There's some slow motion, a very artsy vibe, like most Lars von Trier things. I think this is one of the top tier movies he's made, though, personally. The mom associates the place with her previous work, where she was writing a thesis about genocide. During this process, it really began to increase her belief that women are evil. She's got some serious psychosis going on at one point. This isn't just normal grief response. We slowly watch her kind of mentally degrade. There's some sexual violence on her part, and she actually attacks her partner violently, drilling a hole in his leg and attaching a large weight to it, so he can't go anywhere. So at this point, she is just in like the throes of some delusional psychosis induced by her grief. She decides that she's evil. She admits that she knew her son had been getting up and going out. She ends up cutting off a pretty important body part on herself. So a bunch of stuff happens, and dude ends up strangling her. So this movie was praised the most for its artistic execution, which I agree with. And the part I find most interesting about this movie is that Lars von Trier decided that it would be a fun way to work through his own depression. This movie kind of sticks with you and makes you feel like, whoa. The next one is titled The Death King. It's actually a German movie, and I think it's Der Todesking. Hold on now.
Der Todesking.
That was really wrong. Der Todesking. Anyway, all of that translates to the Death King. So this one is different. I think all of these movies are different, but this one's different in a different way. Same guy who made Necromantic made this movie. If you know about Necromantic for some reason, a movie about necrophilia, then you're familiar with this guy. Should have a small idea of what you're in for. He's got some serious hang-ups about death, which, same, not to that extent. He's experimental, similar to Gumo, bringing up Gumo again. There's no central characters. The whole movie explores topics related to violent death and suicide. Trigger warning, going to be talking about suicide and death a lot, so hold on to your butts. So this movie's broken down into 7 different chapters, and each episode or chapter is attributed to a day of the week. Between each episode, there's a vision of a human body slowly rotting. So I'm not going to go through each one of these. So on Monday, there's a suicide. Tuesday, there's a murder, but actually a suicide. Yeah. Wednesday, there's a man sitting on a bench talking about how he has killed his wife to some girl. We don't know any other details. Then there's another suicide. Thursday, they're talking about some people who jumped off a bridge. Friday is some chain letter that kills you or something. Movie starts to kind of decline in this little section here. I lost some interest. Saturday, mass shooting. And then Sunday is another suicide, sort of. The one thing about this movie that really landed it on this list for me is a statement that I found when I was looking over some of the making of the movie. It leaves you with a feeling that you can't quite place, but you wish would go away. That's true. I don't think there's anything that describes any movie better than that ever. Okay, I'm exaggerating. The next one is Irreversible, or Irreversible. Let's break this out again. If you haven't noticed, all of these movies are not based in America. Americans just don't do a great job with disturbing content. I don't know why. Put the right word in there. My bad. Sure.
Irreversible. Irreversible.
Irreversible. I'm sorry, guys. I'm American. And I'm from Kentucky. So this movie is super fascinating to me. The way it's put together, the reversal of the story, where they literally put the last scene first and then just play it backwards. And just, wow. Now, this movie was made by the same guy who made Enter the Void. Gasper, no? I don't know, I'm going to put his name up here. I can't. As we've seen, pronunciation is not my strong suit. So the overall premise of this movie is that there's these 2 men that are both in love with this girl, and they set out to avenge a very brutal attack that takes place on her. By attack, I mean a beating and rape. So this movie is made into 13 different segments, again, from the end to the beginning. Each is either a continuous shot or it is pieced together to look like a continuous shot, which does its job. You know how people say things about movies being unflinching? If I were to call any movie unflinching, it would be this one. There's a very, very graphic rape scene. It's very troubling. Still trying to figure out, like, the meme behind the reverse order. I guess I'll do a little deeper dive into this one, too. The very beginning starts out with one guy being arrested and another one being taken off on a stretcher. And it's just chaos and intense violence. And it starts in a BDSM club that is named The Rectum. This movie's a lot. I don't even want to go into detail beyond what I already have. One of the taglines for this movie is "Time destroys everything." Accurate. I saved the best? Worst? I don't know. You decide. A Serbian film. I left this one at number 1 for a specific reason. Things that could qualify as more disturbing depending on how you're categorizing things. That's fine. This is my list. It's been banned in a lot of countries. Makes sense. And this one is considered arguably one of the most disturbing films of all time. And the reason why I have it at number 1 is because it was my first real introduction into really extreme disturbing horror. I had a friend say that the movie makes you feel like you want to take a shower afterwards. They weren't kidding. You want to just scald your skin off. We're talking like Evil Dead remake in the hot shower, just melt your skin off your face so that you don't have to think about anything ever again. Okay, that was a little dramatic. This movie is about a semi-retired male porn star. He's offered some work by some friends when he's experiencing some financial concern. There's a little ambivalence related to returning to the industry. At one point, his son finds some of his old movies. This kid's like 10, maybe. So in an effort to secure his family's future, He takes them up on the offer. He's apparently really good at his job. So he goes to meet these people to go film this movie, and the meeting point is an orphanage. An empty orphanage. There's no actual, like... This is really hard to describe. It's an upsetting scene. It's not the most upsetting scene. It upsets him so much so that he is just, like, out of there. He's like, nope, not doing this. This is not for me. So he leaves, and then is seduced by some doctor person that's working with them, some woman. She ends up sedating him. There's a lesson here somewhere. So he wakes up, has no memory of what's happened. He's got like blood on him and he's all messed up. So he goes back to the orphanage, which is now abandoned set, and finds recordings of what happened. So it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And just when you're like, oh no, this couldn't possibly be any worse, it gets there. His family's brought into it in a unimaginable way. I remember the first time watching this being like, oh my God, how could a family recover from something like this? And now, as a trauma therapist, I still kind of feel that way. And I've seen a lot of people recover from a lot of things, but this, And just when you think the family may finally get some peace in one way, shape, or form, nope. It's very bleak. I remember just feeling very like, oh no. So there's a lot of controversy regarding this film, why it was made, what the point is. It's actually very high budget, and the cinematography is good. It's gritty and dark and grimy and just emotionally disruptive. The director of this movie at one point said that the Western world has lost feelings and they want to buy those feelings. I think he's hinting at us being greatly desensitized to a lot of things. This movie kind of kicks it out of you. One statement about this movie is that it's a pointless shocker and societal allegory, a film whose imagery is so gruesome as to leave you scarred for life, or rolling your eyes for 100 minutes. That's fair. So all of these movies push boundaries and try to evoke unpleasant emotions. And it's all seemingly for some kind of reason. With each one, there's a message or a mix of messages being sent, which is why I think I like them. Like them. Something about a movie being able to be referred to as grotesquely beautiful just really draws me in. I usually regret it, but it's quite the experience.